Mason wasn't planning to stop at the black market station that day. He only needed a few spare parts for his ship engine, but the storm outside was getting worse, and his fuel levels were low. The station looked old and rusted, hidden deep. In the asteroid belt, perfect place for smugglers, traders, and trouble inside. It smelled like oil, smoke, and old blood. Strange creatures moved around, some with 4 arms, some with none. No one smiled, no one talked unless it was about credits. Mason kept his head down. He didn't want to get involved, but then he heard something. A sound, faint but sharp. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, more like a whimper, a soft cry. Hidden beneath layers of thick noise and loud machines, he followed the sound step by step until he reached a metal door in the back. There was a sign above it, scrap only, no refunds. He pushed the door open slowly. What he saw made his breath catch. In the corner of the dim room was a cage, not clean or new. It looked like it was built from broken ship parts and wires. Inside it sat a girl, an alien girl. Her skin was a soft pale blue, bruised in many places. Her silver hair was tangled and dirty, and her eyes, large and glowing faint purple, stared at the floor without moving. One of her arms was mechanical, but broken. Her leg was wrapped in something like tape, and her back. Mason could see metal sticking out. She looked like someone had tried to repair her and given up halfway. "She broke in," said a voice behind him. Mason turned to see a fat trader with 4 eyes and a thick belt full of keys used in arena. "But not good anymore," the trader added. "Too quiet, not fun to watch. So we put her here, for parts, maybe." Mason stepped closer to the cage. The girl didn't react. She didn't look up. He knelt down, keeping his voice low. "Hey," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." Still, no answer. But her fingers moved just slightly. A twitch, a small flick of life. "How much?" Mason asked the trader, still staring at her. The trader laughed. "You want her?" "She not worth much, but fine, 50 credits. Mason's eyes narrowed. "She's alive," he said. "She's not scrap." The trader shrugged. 50, or I shut the door again." Mason didn't know why he did it. He could have walked away. He should have walked away, but something in the girl's silence felt louder than any scream. He handed over the credits. The trader tossed him the key without care. Mason unlocked the cage slowly. When the door creaked open, the girl didn't move, so he knelt again and held out his hand. "I'm not here to hurt you," he repeated. "My name's Mason." The girl looked at him for the first time. Really looked. Her eyes were tired, too tired for fear. But somewhere behind that tired look, there was a question. She didn't speak. But she reached out and touched his hand with her cold fingers, light as air. Mason picked her up gently. She was lighter than he thought, too light, like she hadn't eaten in days, maybe longer. As he carried her through the market, people stared. Some laughed, some looked confused. One man even muttered, "Why bother? Human." But Mason didn't stop. He kept walking all the way back to his ship. Once inside, he placed her on a soft blanket in the med bay. He cleaned her wounds, one by one. Repaired her leg with tools from his bag. Checked her pulse. She was stable, but just barely. She didn't talk, didn't cry, didn't move much. But her eyes followed him always. When he brought her food, she didn't eat. So he left it nearby and gave her space. When he adjusted the lights, he noticed she blinked faster in brightness. So he dimmed them, and every time he left the room, she watched the door until he came back. That night, Mason sat in his pilot's chair. He stared at the stars outside the window. His ship floated quietly in the dark. He had no idea who she was. No name, no story, nothing. But he made a promise to himself. Whatever had broken her, he would not be part of it. He would not give up. She was not a machine, not scrap. She was someone. And if no one else would help her, then he would, even if it was impossible. He would try. Because sometimes, doing the right thing wasn't about winning, it was about being the only one who cared enough to try. The first thing Mason noticed was how silent she was. Not just quiet, but completely silent. No crying, no coughing, no whispering. She didn't even breathe loudly. She lay there on the soft cot in his medbay, wrapped in clean blankets. Her glowing eyes never left him. She watched everything he did, his hands, his face, even the way he walked, not in fear, not in trust, but like someone studying a stranger in a dangerous world. Mason had seen wounded creatures before, wild beasts, injured soldiers, forgotten droids. But she was different. Her silence was not from pain alone. It was survival. He tried talking to her again. "You're safe here," he said softly, placing a small bowl of soup beside her. "No one's going to hurt you." She didn't blink. She didn't move. Only her eyes followed his hand. Mason stood up and walked out of the room. She still didn't eat. Hours passed, and he checked again. The soup was untouched. The girl had shifted slightly, her mechanical arm, now curled protectively against her chest. Mason leaned against the doorframe and sighed. "What did they do to you?" He whispered under his breath. The next day, he tried a different approach. He brought a small device, like a tablet, and placed it in front of her. It lit up with pictures, simple images of food, water, warm clothes, even a smiley face. "Touch the one you want," he said. Tapping the screen, still, she didn't move. But the next morning, the soup bowl was empty. She had waited for him to sleep. That night, Mason smiled to himself. She may not speak, but she understood, and she was starting to trust just a little. 3 days later, she sat up. He walked into the room and found her awake. Leaning against the wall, her eyes met his, and for a moment, they stared at each other in silence. Mason didn't speak right away. He didn't want to scare her. He just nodded, then sat in the chair across the room. "You're healing," he said gently. "I fixed your leg, but your arm, that'll take time." She looked down at her broken mechanical arm. She touched the wires gently with her organic hand and looked back at him. Still no words. But that was okay. Mason spent the next few days working on her repairs slowly. He never touched her without warning. He always asked first, and even if she didn't answer, he moved slowly and carefully. She began reacting when he brought tools near her arm. She stopped pulling away when he brought food. She ate in front of him, not a lot, but enough. One afternoon, while he replaced a small power node near her shoulder, something surprising happened. She reached out. Her fingers brushed against his wrist. It wasn't a grab, not even a strong touch. It was soft, almost unsure, but Mason froze, staring at her. "It's all right," he whispered. "I'm here for the first time." Her lips moved. No sound came out. But she mouthed something, just one word. He couldn't read her lips perfectly, but it looked like, "Why?" Mason leaned back, placing the tools aside. "Because no one else did," he said simply. "Because you didn't deserve what happened to you." She looked away, her shoulders trembling. She wasn't crying, but her whole body shivered. Like she wanted to, Mason didn't push her. He just sat there, waiting, letting her have that moment. Later that night, Mason reviewed her scans on his ship console. Her body was part organic, part machine. Unusual fusion. Not natural, not by birth. Someone had built her, modified her, controlled her. What was more horrifying, many of her cybernetic systems had no safety limits. Pain sensors turned off. Reaction limits overridden. She was made to endure extreme damage without rest. She wasn't just a slave. She was a weapon. Mason closed the file and stared out the window into the blackness of space. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her history, but he made a decision that night. He wouldn't let her be used again. The next morning, she was standing, barely, but standing, she used the wall for support. But her eyes were stronger now, not healed, but alive. Mason stepped in, surprised. "You shouldn't be up yet," he said. Walking quickly to her side, she raised a hand telling him not to touch. Then, she picked up the small tablet he had given her before. She tapped it once. The screen lit up with a picture, a single word. Name. Mason blinked, then smiled. "You want to know my name?" She nodded. "Mason," he said, placing his hand over his chest. "What's yours?" She looked at him for a long time, then shook her head. "No name? Or maybe." She'd forgotten it. He tapped the tablet and typed a new word. "Ara." He showed it to her. "How about Ara?" he asked gently. "You look like someone strong, someone who survived." She stared at the word, then reached out and touched. The screen, a soft beep played. She tapped it again, again and again. "Ara, Ara, Ara." And for the first time, her lips curled just slightly like a smile, trying to return after a long time away. Mason thought it would be a normal repair, just another wire to connect, another panel to seal. But when he opened the small hatch at the base of Ara's spine, he didn't find just circuits and metal. He found something else, something human, and something horrifying there. Deep inside her back, between cables and steel rods, was a piece of cloth hold, faded, stuffed in like someone had tried to hide it. Mason pulled it out carefully. It was stained with dried blood and covered in strange burn marks, but that wasn't what made his hands shake. It was the writing, in small, shaky letters, burned into the fabric. It said, "Please help me. I am still alive." Mason stared at the message. His heart pounded like a drum. He looked at Ara. Still unconscious under mild sedation, her face was calm, peaceful even, but inside her, someone she herself had left this message. He sat back, suddenly cold. They didn't just turn her into a machine. They tried to erase her. When Ara woke up, she saw the cloth in his hand. Her eyes widened. She tried to sit up, but pain stopped her halfway. Mason gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said. "I found it by accident." Her lips pressed tightly together. She reached for the cloth, holding it close like a child would hold a lost toy. Tears didn't fall, but her eyes became glassy. Mason didn't ask questions. He didn't have to. He could see it in her face. This was the only piece of her that hadn't been controlled, hacked, or remade. It was the part of her that still remembered being alive, being herself. That night, Mason dug deeper into her systems. Carefully, slowly, always with her permission. What he found made his stomach twist. There were blocks inside her neural core, massive ones, commands labeled obey, silence, and pain ignore. Someone had designed Ara to never scream, never cry, and never say no. She wasn't broken. She was programmed to suffer. Mason tapped through the lines of code. Every time he tried to remove a block, a warning popped up. Failure to obey will result in system shutdown, over and over again. But Mason didn't stop. He started rewriting her core, line by line, not to fix her, but to free her. In the days that followed, Ara began to change, not suddenly, not loudly, but slowly. Like morning light after a storm, she still didn't speak often. But when Mason asked questions, she nodded or shook her head when he handed her tools. She held them without shaking, and one day, she walked across the room. No wall, no cane, no help, just Ara. On her own feet. Then one morning, Mason woke to a strange sound. He rushed to the med bay, heart pounding. What he found made him stop in the doorway. Ara was sitting cross-legged on the floor, a small datapad in her lap, and she was laughing, not loud, not wild, but real. Soft giggles that sounded almost alien in the silence of the ship. Mason stepped closer. She quickly looked up. "Startled? You okay?" he asked, smiling. She nodded, still holding the data pad close on the screen. A simple image of a small alien creature falling over itself, clumsy and silly, a cartoon. She found it funny. Mason chuckled. "You've got taste," he said, sitting beside her. She tapped a new word on the screen. Home, then pointed to the room, to him, then back to herself. "Home," she repeated, this time with her voice quiet, like wind through broken glass. But there, Mason swallowed the lump in his throat. He reached over and gave her the smallest nod. "Yes," he said, "this is your home now." Later that evening, Mason noticed something strange in the scans again. One of Ara's implants had started blinking something it hadn't done before. It was trying to connect to something. He quickly shut off the network link and opened the interface. A deep signal had been buried inside her from the beginning. Dormant, silent, waiting for the right moment to send out a beacon. Someone was tracking her. Someone was waiting for her to heal. Mason locked the signal, but he knew it was only a matter of time. Whoever built her would come looking. He didn't tell Ara. Not yet, but that night, while she slept, her fingers curled around the small cloth scrap again, and Mason placed a hand on the wall beside her bed. "I'll protect you," he whispered. "I don't care who they are or what they want. You're not a thing, not a weapon. You're Ara." He walked back to the cockpit, eyes cold and steady. He didn't know how long they had. But he knew this: they weren't just fixing her anymore. They were rebuilding war. And next time, he wouldn't just be an engineer. He'd be her shield, no matter the cost. Asterisk, the warning came at dawn. A soft ping echoed from the ship's main console. Mason was sipping his coffee when the screen blinked red. Unauthorized signal detected. Origin unknown. Range close. He dropped the cup. It shattered across the floor. He sprinted to the controls and tapped into the radar feed. And there it was. A dark shape just outside their sensor range, slowly circling. It wasn't a trader. Wasn't a patrol. It was a hunter. Mason rushed to Ara's room. She was already awake. Standing near the window with her arms crossed, her eyes locked on the stars. She'd felt it too. "They're here," she said, her voice clear but low. Mason nodded. "They found the signal." "Even though I tried to block it," Ara turned to him slowly. Her face was calm. But her fingers twitched the way they always did when fear crept in. "They'll try to take me back," she whispered. "I won't go." "You won't have to," Mason said, already opening the armory panel in the wall. "You stay behind the backup door. Seal it and wait." "No," Ara said, stepping forward. "I fight this time." Mason paused. She didn't raise her voice, but the fire behind her eyes was new. Stronger. He handed her a small handheld shield emitter. She gripped it like she'd held one before. He didn't ask. Together, they prepared. Mason rigged the ship's entry with traps, shock pulses, autolock doors, smoke launchers. He wasn't a soldier, but he was a builder, and he knew how to make pain in tight corners. Ara uploaded herself into the ship's internal grid. Her mind merged with the cameras and systems. For the first time since he'd met her, she chose to plug in, not as a weapon, but as a defender. The ship landed in silence. No lights, no sound, just a black shadow against blacker space. Then came the knock, not a code, not a transmission. A knock, slow and steady on the outer hatch. Mason stood at the controls. Ara watched through the cameras. He hit the comms. "Go away," he said flatly. "No one here belongs to you." The reply was a growl, a voice both mechanical and organic. "She's ours. Human. Property of Project Warden. Return the asset or be marked as hostile." Mason smiled. "Already hostile," he said, and pressed the first trigger. The trapdoor opened beneath the hunter team's feet. 3 fell instantly. But the 4th floated midterjet boots humming, then fired. Mason ducked as a pulse blast cracked the wall above his head. Era activated the inner shield, splitting the ship's hallways into tight corridors. She moved through the system like electricity, turning lights on and off, guiding Mason where to move. When one of the hunters tried breaching the sidewall, she locked him in a compartment and vented the oxygen. Cold and fast, Mason fought too, using a stun rifle he hadn't used in years. He wasn't strong, but he was precise, and with Era guiding him, he became deadly. The last hunter reached the main med bay door. Era's room. He lifted a plasma cutter, ready to slice it open. But before he could start, the door opened. She stood there. Era, no longer afraid, no longer broken. Her eyes glowed, and the shield in her hand buzzed to life. The hunter paused. "You don't belong with him," he sneered. "You were built to obey." Era tilted her head. "I was built, yes," she said, stepping closer, "but now I'm alive." She swung the shield, deflecting the plasma cutter and driving him back. He tried to strike again, but Mason appeared behind him and fired. The blast hit the hunter's spine, sending him crashing to the floor. They stood there. Era breathing hard, Mason watching her. The ship went quiet. Later, they dragged the unconscious hunters into the cargo bay. Mason locked the outer doors and waited. A silent command drone arrived an hour later, scanned the scene, and left with them. No more messages, no more threats, just silence. Again, Mason turned to Ara as they stood alone once more. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I remember now," she said quietly. "They used to send me into fights, not with weapons, but with pain." She looked at her hands. "I wasn't allowed to lose." Mason touched her shoulder. "You won today." Era turned to him. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "I want to fight, not for them, but for me." Mason smiled. "Then we'll do it together." They sat in silence for a long time. No alarms, no voices. Just the soft hum of stars outside the window in that quiet era whispered something. Not a weapons code, not a command, just a wish. "Let them come again," she said. "This time, I'll be ready." Mason lay on the med bay floor, blood spreading fast across his side. Smoke drifted from the wall behind him where a plasma blast had hit. The last hunter, though defeated, had left behind a timed trap, one final gift, and Mason hadn't seen it in time. Ara dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling. He smiled through the pain, coughing. "I'm fine," he whispered, but he wasn't. Not this time. His vision blurred, and the room started to spin. Era's face hovered over him, worried, confused, afraid. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She tried again, but the words were stuck, like chains wrapped around her throat. Her fingers gripped Mason's shirt. His blood stained her palms. She wanted to scream for help. She wanted to call his name, but all she could do was watch. Era had faced machines, traps, and shadows from her past, but now the only enemy was silence, and she couldn't fight it. Not with her fists, not with her tech, not even with her mind. She tried to activate the ship's med system, but her hand shook too much. She slammed her fist against the console in frustration. Mason's breath was growing shallow. Then, something inside her broke. No, something unlocked. A sharp pain hit her head, then her chest, then her throat. She gasped, then screamed. Not a cry of pain, a word, a name, Mason. Her voice tore through the ship like thunder, soft but sharp, shaky but real. It echoed. Mason blinked slowly, his eyes fluttering open. "You spoke," he whispered, smiling. Era's lips trembled. "Don't die," she said, her voice hoarse but clear. "I'm not ready to be alone again." The ship's medbots, now alerted, rushed in from the side bay. Era had never liked the bots. They reminded her of cold hands and darker days. But now she let them through. She watched them. Stabilize Mason. Inject healing fluids and scan his wounds. They would keep him alive, for now, but only barely. Hours passed. Era never left his side. She sat beside him, hand resting gently on his. She whispered to him in broken words, telling him things she had buried deep. I was taken from my home, she said softly. They told me I was too quiet, too weak, so they made me louder by cutting away pieces. She looked down, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. They put machines in my throat to control my speech. Every time I cried, they erased more. Until there was nothing left, Mason didn't speak. He was still unconscious. But she knew he could hear her, so she kept talking about her parents. About the stars she remembered as a child. About how she used to hum to herself when she was scared. That voice, her voice was never gone, only hidden, and Mason. He brought it back. By the next day, Mason was awake. Barely, but awake. Era was already waiting when his eyes opened. He tried to speak, but she placed a finger gently on his lips. I remember, she whispered. I remember my name. He blinked at her, trying to sit up. What is it? He asked, his voice dry. She smiled, not wide, but real. My name was Ara before they took it. They tried to erase it, but you helped me find it again. Mason smiled weakly. Good, he said. It suits you. He spent the next few days healing slowly. And Era never left the med bay. But something had changed in her. She spoke now, not all the time, not with many words. But she chose when to speak, and every word felt like a victory. She helped Mason walk again, helped him eat, read to him from the datapad. Sometimes old alien stories, sometimes ones she made up. Her voice, though still rough, was growing stronger each day. One evening, while Mason sat by the window, Era brought him something. It was a small, old recorder she had found in the cargo hold. She placed it gently in his hand. What's this? He asked. A message, she said, sitting beside him. I want to record something, just in case. He nodded and activated it. Era looked straight into the lens and said, My name is Era. I was taken, broken, and turned into a machine. But one human believed I was still more than pieces. He gave me food, safety, and time. But most of all, he gave me back my voice. Mason turned off the recorder and looked at her. I didn't do anything special, he said quietly. She shook her head. No, she replied. You did the impossible. That night, Ara sat alone by the ship's control panel. Her fingers hovered over the transmitter. She could send a message now across galaxies. Not a distress call, not a scream for help, but a voice. Her voice. She pressed record, then smiled. And for the first time in years, she simply said, I'm still alive. Asterisk, a ship was coming. But this one wasn't silent. Its engines roared like a storm in the stars, and its markings were different, clean. Sharp, military, not hunters this time, not slavers. Something else. Mason stood at the window, his body still sore. Era stood beside him, her expression unreadable. She watched the ship as it grew closer, not afraid, not shaking, just waiting. They found me, she said quietly. But not the ones we fought before. Mason frowned. Who are they? She didn't answer at first. Then finally whispered, the people who made me. The ship docked without asking for permission. It overrode the lock codes like slicing. Through paper, 3 figures stepped into the bay. Wearing white armor and masks with mirrored visors, they didn't speak at first. Then the tallest one lowered their hood. It wasn't a man, it wasn't a woman, it was something else. Something engineered just like Ara had once been. Subject 9, the figure said. We thought you were destroyed. Ara stood tall. I destroyed the version you made, she said calmly. This is me now. Mason stepped forward. But the figure raised a hand. We're not here to reclaim you. It said, we're here to activate you. Ara blinked. What? You're not just a girl, the figure continued. You're the last of Project Warden, built to defend our dying world from the outside, but we lost control, and the others didn't survive. Mason stepped between them. She's not yours, he growled. She's free. The figure looked at him with curiosity. Free, it repeated. Even she doesn't know what's inside her. The visitors activated a small device. Era's body twitched, her arms locked, eyes glowing bright without warning. She gasped, dropping to one knee. Mason grabbed her. Turn it off, he shouted. The figure calmly tapped the device again. Ara relaxed, breathing heavily. She is wired with defense systems you cannot imagine. The figure explained. She was not meant to live as a civilian. She was meant to lead battles, end wars, protect our people. I never agreed to be your weapon, Era said through gritted teeth. You stole me. The group offered her a choice. Come with them, and they would restore her power fully. She would become stronger than ever before. She would have a purpose again. Mason watched her carefully. He said nothing. He didn't want to influence her. Era turned to the lead figure. What if I say no? You'll be hunted again, it replied. Others want you destroyed or owned. We offer safety, identity, power. Ara looked at her hands. She remembered the pain, the silence, the cage. She remembered Mason's kindness, his patience, his choice to see her as more. She didn't need to think. She already knew her answer. No, she said. I won't be your weapon. The figure nodded once, but instead of attacking, they left quietly, as if satisfied. We'll see you again, the leader said, when the war reaches your door. And then they were gone. That night, Ara sat by the open engine hatch. Mason joined her. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded. Slowly. They didn't lie, she said. There's still something inside me. I kinda feel it now sleeping. Mason looked at her carefully. Do you want it gone? She thought for a long time, then said, no, but I want to control it. In the days that followed, Mason helped her run scans. He showed her how to safely open the access panels inside her core. Together, they rewrote her code line by line, removing command chains, unlocking sealed systems. Not to awaken the weapon, but to give her the choice. Era's hands grew steady, her movements more fluid. She was still a regental, thoughtful, soft-spoken, but now there was something else in her too. Strength, not strength given to her. Strength she claimed one night. She stood on the ship's deck, staring at the stars. She activated the recorder again and spoke into it. My name is Era. I was created as a weapon. I was treated like a tool, owned, used, but I am not their project anymore. I am not their subject 9. I am not broken. I am not yours. I am mine. She turned off the recorder and walked back inside. Mason was already waiting with tea. He didn't say anything. He just handed her the cup. She took it, sat down, and smiled gently. I'm ready, she said. For what? Mason asked. To stop hiding. The great hall of the Interworld Tribunal was filled with voices. Leaders, scientists, and soldiers from more than 20 species had gathered. But when the doors opened and Ara stepped inside, every voice went silent. She walked slowly, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted them all to see her clearly. No chains, no cage, no control codes running in her brain. Just her, wearing armor she built herself, walking beside the one who helped her become free. Mason whispers followed them to the center of the chamber. That's the Warden unit. She was supposed to be a myth. Didn't she go rogue? Era heard every word, but she didn't flinch. She looked forward, eyes glowing with quiet fire. One of the tribunal judges leaned forward and asked coldly, Why are you here, machine? Mason opened his mouth to respond, but Era held up her hand gently. I'll speak, she said, her voice steady. I'm not a machine. She said to the crowd, I'm not a myth, or a project, or a weapon. I'm someone. The silence after her words was louder than any scream. She placed a small device on the podium. It played back her own recording, the message she had made after unlocking her voice. My name is Ara. I was created as a weapon. I was treated like a tool, owned, used. But I am not their project anymore. I am not their subject 9. I am not broken. I am not yours. I am mine. When the message ended, she looked straight at the main council judge. I came here to speak for the others, she said, the ones still trapped, still voiceless, still waiting for someone to care. I got lucky. I had someone who didn't see a machine. He saw a person. She turned her head slightly and nodded toward Mason. He saved me. Mason looked down for a second, then smiled. To him, it had never been about saving. He just couldn't walk away. Another council member, one with deep purple skin and 4 eyes, stood up. If what you say is true, she said, then the Warden Project must be fully shut down. Era nodded. I agree. Gasps followed her. Words, even Mason was surprised. But we must also find those who are still active. Era continued. And we must give them a choice. A younger delegate stood up next. And what of you? He asked. You still have the power inside. You. Don't you? Why should we trust you? Ara's lips pressed together. Then she reached into her belt pouch and pulled out a small silver disc. It was her command core, part of her that once held the activation codes. She placed it on the table before them. I removed it myself, she said. With his help, she added, glancing at Mason. I don't need control programs anymore. I know who I am now. After hours of questions and careful debate, the tribunal reached a decision. The Warden Project would be investigated, shut down across the sectors. Ara would lead a special team, not as a weapon, but as a rescuer, to find others like her, to give them voices again, to give them the same chance she got. When the announcement was made, cheers broke out from the civilian section. People had seen her message broadcast across neutral space. They came not to judge, but to support. Some even held signs. You are not broken. We hear you, Ara. That night, back on Mason's ship, they stood together on the deck. The stars outside were quiet, blinking slowly. I didn't think they'd listen, Mason said softly. They didn't listen, Ara replied. They felt. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small piece of cloth, the same one she had hidden inside her body long ago, the one with the words, "Please help me. I am still alive." She held it in the palm of her hand. It was never just a message, she said. It was proof that deep inside, I always believed someone would come. Mason looked at her, and now, he asked, "What do you believe?" Ara smiled. Now I believe I can be the one who comes for them. Weeks later, Ara stood at the front of her new vessel. A team of engineers, medics, and translators stood behind her. People who volunteered. People who believed they set course for a cold planet once marked as a testing ground. A place where rumors said other subjects still remained in sleep tanks. Waiting as the stars stretched before them, Ara whispered something only Mason could hear. I was never broken, she said. They just couldn't see the pieces that still worked. He placed a hand on her shoulder. No, he said. You were never broken. They were just too blind to fix themselves. And with that, the ship jumped into the dark. Not to fight, not to run, but to rescue. Because once, a human had done the impossible for her. Now, she would do the same for others, one voice at a time.